Very good evening and welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. All eyes today on the meeting of the SCO, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation. Remember, it is the world's largest regional organization when counted for its geographic scope and population. It comprises almost 60% of the area of Eurasia and 40% of the world population, not to mention the economies of trade and commerce across nations. And today was its meeting. It was addressed virtually by Prime Minister Modi. India has the chair of the SCO for this year. What we're going to talk about today, though, is the relevance and the importance of SCO considering who its key members are, because the bloc is very far right now from its goal of unity and peace in the region. It has multiple conflicts of interest, right from territorial disputes, divergent foreign policies, trade wars, and more. While India faces hostile attitudes from Pakistan and China, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a major issue this summit. Prime Minister Modi used strong words to condemn terror and terror-related activities at this summit, while the Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif was in attendance and listening. But the other very important highlight of the SCO meet today, which, by the way, was curtailed from an in-person meeting to a virtual one, which lasted just a few hours, was the presence of Russian President Putin. This is his first appearance at a multilateral event after the entire events of the last few days, where he faced a serious challenge by the Wagner company. Now, Putin asserted Kremlin's resilience in the ongoing crisis. We're going to be talking about what the SCO really means in this day and age and some of the voices we heard. But let's begin with playing out for you the comments from Prime Minister Modi and Putin.
एक्सेलेंसी, आतंकवाद क्षेत्रीय एवं वैश्विक शांति के लिए प्रमुख खतरा बना हुआ है। हम चुनौती से निपटने के लिए निर्णायक कार्रवाई आवश्यक है। आतंकवाद चाहे किसी भी रूप में हो, किसी भी अभिव्यक्ति में हो, हमें इसके विरुद्ध मिलकर लड़ाई करनी होगी। कुछ देश क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को अपनी नीतियों के इंस्ट्रूमेंट के रूप में इस्तेमाल करते हैं, आतंकवादियों को पनाह देते हैं। एससीओ को ऐसे देशों की आलोचना में कोई संकोच नहीं करना चाहिए।
Российский народ как никогда консолидирован. Сплоченность и высокую ответственность за судьбу Отечества российские политические круги, все общество наглядно продемонстрировали, выступив единым фронтом против попытки вооруженного мятежа. Пользуясь возможностью, хочу поблагодарить коллег из стран Шанхайской организации сотрудничества, выразивших поддержку действиям российского руководства по защите конституционного строя.
All right, to speak more on the messages coming out from the SCO and frankly what India is doing in the SCO, does it have the same relevance as before? I'm joined now by Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow ORF, Suhasini Haidar, Diplomatic Editor of The Hindu, with me on the show today. I'm also speaking with Ajay Dua, former Secretary at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, because the SCO has a very important trade angle as well. Let's begin with comments from Suhasini. You have been covering the summit, and one of the key things people are talking about is why it went virtual. And what do you read into that? Does that also signify the relevance of the SCO, frankly? Because for India, the big event of the year is the G20 at the end of the year, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. The G20 is definitely the big event for this government, and it's made more clear by the fact that the government chose to make this its first ever time that India is hosting the SCO. Remember, it became a member in 2017. And the first time India is actually hosting the SCO, they chose to make it go virtual. What's more interesting is that they've given no real reason for the SCO to go virtual. So it can't be because it's because of the COVID pandemic, because the pandemic is over. Last year's SCO summit was held in person. It is probably not about the fact that some of the leaders had not confirmed their participation by June, simply because in the past, when some leaders have not confirmed their participation, like the Tajik SCO a couple of years ago, it was held hybrid. And India and Prime Minister Modi was a part of it virtually. And it probably is not because of the venue, because there are several venues in New Delhi. So it comes down to the fact that it seems that for India right now to have hosted an in-person summit would have made things difficult for the government, would have taken away, perhaps, as you said, from the preparations for the G20. Prime Minister Modi's own busy schedule, because he has just returned from the United States, an important visit there. He's also going to France to become the second Indian Prime Minister to be received as the chief guest at the Bastille Day functions on July 14th. And it was probably felt that this was not the time to hold the SCO, particularly, as you pointed out, Russian President Putin was to have visited India for that. So I think it was a combination of all of these reasons, but perhaps what it shows the most is that India was willing to really let the promise of this SCO hosting go for whatever reason and truncate the plan. The plan originally was for a 2-day summit where all these leaders of Russia, of Iran, even Pakistan, President of China, Belarus, who's hoping to become a member, and the Central Asian states, the 4 of them that are members of the SCO, would have all come to New Delhi for this event. I think it was still on the cards in May, so something obviously changed. And instead, what we saw was that event of 2 to 3 hours play out with only single speeches, a single session held by the leaders, each of them making what were pre-drafted comments, and actually most of them making the same comments pretty much that they had made in May when the foreign ministers had met.
So it's a truncated SCO, it's a virtual SCO. Nevertheless, the 2 important points, like I mentioned in my introduction, Prime Minister Modi taking on the issue of terrorism very, very clearly. It's seen as a dig at Pakistan, and Putin showing up and saying all is well back home. Manoj Joshi, do you think that those are the highlights? And apart from that, let's ask the tough question. Is the SCO really that relevant, considering it's each country for their own right now?
I personally don't think that SCO is particularly relevant because to me, it appears like talking shop, meaning it's got, yes, it's true that it represents a vast region with a huge economy, potential, etc. But the SCO actually never gets to do anything. Yes, they've had some exercises and all that, counter-terror exercises between some of the countries. But even in the counter-terrorism business, it doesn't play a very significant role. And in this case, there was, I think, largely agreement on doing something in Afghanistan, but even there, the SCO doesn't seem to have done much. We'll, of course, have to see the joint statement to see whether there's anything more beyond that. But insofar as Mr. Modi's speech is concerned, what is also striking is that, all right, bashing Pakistan is fine. Meaning, yes, terrorism is raised everywhere. In fact, the strange thing is terrorism has declined in India over time. And yet, from the governmental point of view, it seems to have taken a life of its own. At the same time, the Prime Minister didn't even obliquely refer to our problems with China. Meaning the Chinese president was also sitting there, but there were no references to that. And so, as I said, bashing Pakistan, fine, no big deal. I think we bash them almost every other day. As far as Mr. Putin is concerned, I think, yes, it was a very important thing for him. And I think he would have loved to have been here in person. In the presence, in the circumstances, the fact that the Wagner mutiny had been put down, I think the Russians were keen to show up in an in-person event, have their leader come in an in-person event to a country like India. But I think for the same reason, the Indians didn't want to overemphasize the Russian connection. Having just returned from the United States, and the Prime Minister wanted to walk the fine line in dealing with Russia. And so I don't think I think the Russian ambassador has even said it quite bluntly that the Russians were expecting an in-person event. And unfortunately
Not
for
mistaken,
them,
Mr.
it
Joshi.
didn't
We want Putin back end of the year, don't we, for G20? And is he going to
But-
come back again? Wouldn't we
but-
rather have him then?
frankly, we don't know whether he will come. But
Yeah.
this was an opportune moment because of the Wagner thing.
Right. In terms of
That's
the
from
time.
the Russian point of view. In terms of timing,
Yeah.
the Russians certainly wanted to show that they were in control and their man was up and about.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Ajay Dua. The purpose of the SCO was to contain the growth of Western powers and America and to create alternatives, create economic cooperation as an alternative. In the real world today, that seems to be a completely irrelevant focus. Or is there more to this? Is there still scope to an SCO for India with members like Pakistan, China, who we have great troubles with, and whatever we want to trade with Russia, we're already really doing?
Tamanna, thank you for having me in this discussion. I look at the opportunity to interact with the Central Asian countries, 4 of which are members, almost the original members of the SCO, started in 2001. That there was earlier, when we had our relations with Pakistan were not so bad, we had a passage to these countries. Trade from India had a passage to these countries, but ever since our worsening of our political relationship with Pakistan, that opportunity has been lost, and that gets reflected in our figures of trade with these 4 countries. Second, there is a dominance of economic relationship between China and these 4 countries. China stepped in the moment Russia backed out a bit. Earlier, if you would recall, actually the SCO had come to be set up in the late 90s, not even 2001. As it said, that's in the present format. And at that time, it was to kind of post the Cold War, build trust between the member nations and particularly with the Russian Federation. And the initiative was at that time as much with Russia as with China. There is an opportunity that we could have used the SCO to build up our relationships. For many years, since 1995, we had neglected virtually, in terms of foreign policy, etc., state visits to these 4 countries, and only 2 in 2015, our Prime Minister went to all 5 of them at one go and got back. That I look at that there is potential of energy in the Central Asian countries, as well as there is a potential that we could have exploited it through development of better connectivity, which is one of the goals of setting up this SCO. But perhaps we've lost some opportunities because by holding this in a virtual mode, because our Prime Minister doesn't get a chance to interact with the Prime Minister or the presidents of these 4 countries. And actually, if you'll recall, Tamanna, earlier in 2022, also a similar opportunity was lost by us when we canceled the invitations which had been extended to these 4 heads of state for the Republic Day parade on grounds of pandemic. So some opportunity which we had of holding bilateral meetings, and that's an advantage when you do an in-person meeting. Otherwise, as you very rightly said, everybody read out the prepared speeches, emphasized we emphasized terrorism, the Russian presence, Putin's presence was to convey a different message altogether.
Interesting inputs coming in from the SCO and flashes coming in of statements there, and I just want to bring that into the discussion. It says SCO leaders say Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz, Pakistan, Russian Federation, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan reaffirm support for Belt and Road Initiative proposed by China. The leaders say unilateral, unlimited expansion of global missile defense systems by certain countries or groups of countries has a negative impact on international security and stability. SCO leaders say interference in the internal affairs of other states under the pretext of combating terrorism and extremism is not permitted. Suhasini, is China, in a sense, reaffirming its space in this geographical territory through the Belt and Road?
Well, to start with, I'd just like to answer that last question, if I may, as well, about the relevance of the SCO. The fact is, SCO is not something that India joined, it's not a legacy membership of India's. It is a membership India took in 2017. It may have been observer since 2005, but the membership India took was in 2017, the same year as India chose to revive and work with the other US and Australia and Japan to work on the Quad. So it is a very integral part of what this government considers its strategic autonomy plank, and something that it has said again and again. The second part is, yes, as Mr. Dua said, this is an area where you speak to countries you may not otherwise have the ability to do that with. And it includes a country like Russia. It includes a country like China. Now it includes, along with India, Pakistan also got membership of the grouping. So for India to step away from SCO would mean that India is essentially giving space in its own geography to a grouping that has Russia, Central Asian states, Iran, Pakistan, and China. Is that something that's considered positive? And the third point, and I'll leave it there, is that what Mr. Dua pointed out, that very important initiative that was made towards Central Asian countries is the one being hurt the most when India downgrades its relationship with the SCO, because this was a part of India's new look at Central Asia. And of course, this is the second time that Central Asian leaders were invited to India and they had to cancel for whatever reason. So hopefully there will be an opportunity to revive at least this part of the engagement at some point. Now, to your question about whether China is taking over, there's no question. Russia is, of course, in many ways, China's closest partner. Russia is not a part of the Belt and Road Initiative yet, but all the other countries that are members of the BRI are actually are members of the SCO, are actually part of the BRI when it comes to connectivity. However, the fact that India has opposed the BRI has always been noted. So SCO joint statements have always noted that India stayed out of the paragraph on the Belt and Road Initiative and on connectivity. Prime Minister Modi has made that point very clearly in his speech when he talks about the necessity of connectivity initiatives taking into account sovereignty and territorial integrity. And what is important is also we heard from some of the other players like Uzbekistan talking about the fact that yes, the BRI is there, and yes, they are doing this railway connectivity from China to Kyrgyzstan to Uzbekistan, a very important rail link, because eventually that might actually even go to Afghanistan. But that they make the point that their connectivity to the seas, and remember, Central Asian countries are at the prime of this because they are double landlocked countries. The connectivity to the seas is through ports in both Pakistan and Iran. Why this is significant is because India has been pushing at the SCO that Chabahar be considered as a port for goods to come through from Central Asia directly into Iran or through Afghanistan into Chabahar. So while, yes, there's no question that the Belt and Road Initiative has the large part of the SCO in its network, alternate alignments and alternate connectivity possibilities are also being discussed. So it is important that India keeps its foothold inside the SCO if it wants this entire part of the region to also take the Indian concerns into account.
I want to sort of examine India's current foreign policy. Mr. Joshi, let me come to you on this. And it's very interesting. We seem to be in a position where we have a seat at every table and are balancing apparent opposite poles with a fair amount of ease. So great visit to the United States, important conversations with Putin. We are in SCO, we are in BRICS, we are in Quad. How do you look at this?
We live in an era where people are members of multiple organizations. Now, the question is, some of those organizations work, some don't, some are paper organizations, some are talking shops. So that part of it, I understand. But I think we need to understand also that India is an extremely large country. Many people call this a subcontinent. Actually, it's a continent. And this, our location gives us a requirement for a continental policy as well as an oceanic policy. And I think the oceanic policy is fairly clear, Quad and all that kind of stuff that is happening. The continental part of it is a bit murky for the simple reason that Pakistan blockades us from access to the continent, or for that matter, even Iran. So there's a Pakistani blockade there. Now with Iran's accession to the SCO, I think a certain potential has opened for us that I think is a much more significant thing than for many of the others, because we are involved with Iran in the Chabahar project. We are involved with Iran in the international north-south transportation corridor issue. And Iran happens to be the closest source of hydrocarbons for India. Now, the question is for New Delhi to pick up courage and to tell the Americans that, look, as far as Iran's concerned, many of these issues are of our vital interest. Because of the US, we have kind of restrained our relationship with Tehran. But now with Iran in the SCO, I think if we want to take advantage, the point is that you right in the beginning, we said we are members of many organizations. It is up to you as to how you can use a particular organization for your purposes. Now, in some cases, your membership has a negative value in the sense you can use your membership in a particular organization to block any move which may hurt your interests. That's a negative use of membership of an organization. But you can also have a positive use of an organization, which requires, I suspect, some more gumption, some effort, some more skill and agility. So I think the important thing is not the multiplicity of organization. The point is which organizations can you identify which at a particular point in time can further your interests, and also as a counter this thing, which are the organizations you need to be in to ensure that they don't harm your interests.
Quick word from you, Mr. Dua, on the trade aspect from the point of view of in a time of free trade agreements and India going ahead and inking our own agreements as and when it suits us individually as well. What is the utility of such groupings, and are we using the geographical location of Central Asia, as you mentioned before, well enough?
Tamanna, I'm all for joining as many organizations as we can benefit from, a point which was just recently made, which was just made before by Mr. Joshi before me. The fact is, for us, making sure that we continue to have access to Central Asia, whether it is through a road built by the Chinese or a rail link built by them, is immaterial as long as it is available for us for building up our trade and cultural relationship. We've had civilizational links with Central Asia, historical links that we all know about. Similarly, we've invariably wanted and have had in the past links with Iran. It was the American sanctions which came in the way even of our trade in energy with Iran, if you'll recall, just a few years ago. At Chabahar port, which we've been extremely keen on, we've actually from Chabahar up north, we've financed railway lines, we've financed roads. They've gone, the progress has been patchy because one, Iran has been having a second thought. Second, we needed to have exemption from the United States, saying that we could do, complete certain infra projects which we were involved in. So I would think that let's not undermine any regional affiliation,
Absolutely.
particularly which, as in its charter, building up, as it may be security, it may be removal of suspicion, concern, but gradually it's getting spelt out that connectivity, increased trade, etc., is also a part of the game.
Absolutely.
So I would like to
I will have to wrap here. I'm completely out of time. I will have to wrap here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us on the show today, and keep in mind that even though it's a virtual summit, it is an important grouping that India is very much a part of as of now. Thank you so much to all of you. We'll take a very short break, but we're coming right back. Stay tuned.